seize the moment.
All right, Julie, welcome to the show. How you doing?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I am doing all right. Happy that it's cooled down a little bit because the heat was killing me last week. How did you cope with the heat?
Air conditioning.
Nice, nice, lucky. I have like one air conditioning unit and it's in the top floor in the office, so it's in the room I'm in. But when I'm doing this, I have to turn it off because it's way too loud. But yeah, I'm happy to have you on the show. I love your energy. You're always smiling. Every time I see you in a picture, in person, down the street, you're always smiling, full of energy. And that's something that I really admire because I know some days it's hard for me to bring out the energy, but every time I see you, it always brings some happiness out of me. So I really appreciate that. So happy to have you on the show. And I wanted to start with like where you're from because how long have you been in Toronto for?
I've been here for just over 3 years. I moved in April of 2017.
Nice. And where were you living prior to Toronto?
I lived in Calgary and I was in Calgary for about 6 years before moving here.
Oh, nice. And where were you before that?
Everywhere. I had a career in oil and gas. I did some overseas work. I was in a tiny town kind of in northern Alberta, and I was in the city in between Calgary and Edmonton for about 8 years. Yeah, so all over Alberta, really.
Nice, nice. And is that where you were born in Alberta?
Yeah, I was born in southern Alberta, a little town kind of close to the US border.
Cool, cool, cool. And so what made you like transition to Toronto? Like what brought you to the city?
Fate, really. So I was here on an unrelated business trip and was so excited because I was like, I'm going to stay downtown and I'm going to go to all these like super cool spin classes. And then I'm going to come back to Calgary and I'm going to be so much better at teaching spin because I got to see all these cool classes. And then I came here and there was no cool spin classes. And I was like kind of mind blown. And also like, that's what started the wheels because Sheldon and I were kind of looking to do something different, but Calgary was a very saturated market and it didn't make sense. I was already teaching at a studio. So it's like for me to branch out and like do my own thing didn't really make sense because it just like it just didn't make sense. And
Mm-hmm,
so when
hmm.
I came here and saw that gap in the market at that time, I was like, whoa, like Toronto doesn't know anything about what's about to hit it. So, and then here we are.
That's crazy. I mean, just last night I was watching Frasier with Kat. She loves that show for some reason. And it was like the last season and they had mentioned spin. They're in Seattle and spin was like a big thing around that time. But it just blew my mind. Like it made me think of something that you just mentioned right now, like how Toronto, like the spin community just didn't really like blow up until like I guess you got here and made it more of a thing. So I appreciate that. I know spinning is part of my training. It kicks my ass every single time. How did you get into spin? Like what drew you towards it?
So I was a weightlifter and I didn't really do cardio. I didn't love cardio because
Uh,
I'd gone from running. That was my fitness journey started running and I went from running and I was like a skinny little beanpole with a whole bunch of injuries. And then I found the weight room and I was like, this is amazing. Like I'm so strong and I love it. And I didn't love doing cardio. So I didn't
mhm.
really do it. It was kind of one of those, like, I just lift weight faster. And then a friend of mine took this class in Calgary and she was like, oh my God, you have to go. They like lock you in this dark room and you spin and like this really good music and like it's just amazing. She's like, you leave covered in sweat and it's so good. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna hate this. And then I went and I loved it, but I also hated it, but I was so bad at it, like so bad at it that I bought the 2 week pass because I was like, I've never entered a sport or anything. Like this is gonna sound terrible, but I've never done a sport that I haven't been good at almost immediately. And
Mhm,
I got on a
mhm.
spin bike and I was like, terrible. Like I
Yeah,
was like, what's the beat? What are they doing? What are they move? How the fuck are they doing this? And I think I sat down for like 90% of the class and just like looked around in amazement at all these people moving. And I was like, how do you know what to do? What's going on? And then I was like, no, you know what? I'm going and I'm going to get good at this. And then
It's
in those
awesome.
2 weeks, I was like, I love it. I need to go every day. And went from never spinning to like 6 times a week.
that's crazy. That's crazy. I love that mindset. I mean, that's something I talked about earlier in one of the other episodes about just being a beginner at something, right? Like just like you, like I liked to do things that I was good at. I'm okay. I'm good at soccer. I'm good at this. I'm good at that. I'm gonna stick to these things, and then, to try something and I think dive into it the way that you did is really admirable. And I feel like that it keeps life interesting. It keeps us growing. You know what I mean? And look to where it got you now. You know what I mean? Going from like not being so good at it to being amazing at it, I think is a really good thing.
Yeah, if you would have told me in 2013 that this class would lead me here, I'd have been like, yeah, right.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, it's really crazy to look back at stuff like that. So, how did you go from that? So you went 6 days in a row, 6 days a week, and then like what made you decide to like what were you doing at the time? What was your career at the time?
So I was working in oil and gas. I worked in oil and gas for about 15 years, I think total. I'm gonna date
Hmm.
myself, and now you're gonna know how old I am. But yeah, I worked for about 15 years, and I'd gone from being in the field to then going into sales, and I was selling the service that I used to do in the field. So it was less about the actual like commodity type sales and more about like a technical support role. So it was more of like I don't know, like a technical advisor type role, which was really cool. It added a lot of flexibility to my schedule because I now had clients and meetings and things like that. But it also like
Hmm.
it taught me a whole lot about business and why you make certain decisions and why like there certain things are worth it and certain things aren't worth it because from a field level you're just like that's so dumb, why wouldn't they do that? And then you see it and from the perspective you're like, oh, because it costs this and you make this and it just doesn't make sense. So it was kind of a cool experience there. Anyway, getting derailed. So I used to take my clients to spin class
Hmm.
because kind of the thing in downtown Calgary oil and gas boys club is you go for beers at lunch and I was like, I don't, that's so lame. Like I don't want to one, I don't want to day drink and ruin the rest of my Friday.
Yeah, yeah.
Like it's just I wasn't really into it. So I started this like the Friday fitness club and would take my clients to a Friday spin class. And then I used at the beginning it started in the summer and I was like, then we can go across the street and have margaritas after. And everyone's like, ooh. And then it's the margaritas sort of slipped away and the spin kind of stuck.
Nice. Good for you.
Yeah. And then I started teaching myself and then I would just make them come to my class. It's like,
Nice.
now you're coming to my spin class on Friday at lunchtime. Sorry about it.
And how did you manage that transition? So from going to like something very like kind of corporate, I guess, into like fitness and instructing in fitness, like how did you manage to do that or why did you decide to do that?
So it was a side hustle. I still kept my corporate job. I still worked. I mean, again in that like technical advisor role, it wasn't really 9 to 5. It was kind of like whenever things were on fire, you had to go and fix them.
Hmm.
So I was able to teach. I taught lunchtime classes, which worked out for me because I'd bring clients and stuff. And then I realized that I wasn't so much in love with just spinning. I loved teaching spin, and that's kind of how this whole journey started. It was when we were looking for different moves outside of oil and gas and like trying to separate ourselves from the industry. It was like, well, the best part of my day is when I teach spin, so how can I make my whole life the best part of my day? It's kind of how that.
Nice. That's fucking cool. That's really fucking cool. What about teaching is it that you like? Like what draws you to the teaching?
To know that like people, well, one, that people are showing up for you, so you have to show up for them, so it keeps you accountable.
Hmm.
That you have such an impact on each person at an individual level. Like I've had people come up and be like, man, like I had to put my dog down yesterday and I was so sad and I came to this class and like it just got me through it. So it's like being a part of the journey to someone bettering themselves is just such a powerful
Yeah.
thing. And you realize like how powerful that is and how much of an impact you can have. And you can share that message of like I find a lot of messaging in the fitness industry is like you can be skinny like me and you can work off your turkey dinner on Thanksgiving. And I just think that there's the gap in that messaging market where it's like, no, like let's move our bodies because it's therapeutic. Let's move our bodies because it makes us feel good. Let's move our bodies because we can. And you
Yes.
have the power and the impact to change the mindset of somebody who's doing an extra spin class because they ate a cookie.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so that was kind of what got me like addicted to it, as I was like, whoa, like not only do I love doing the actual act of spinning, but like now you have this like this impact on people that you didn't realize you could have.
Yeah, it's really crazy how it brings people together, like the community aspect to it. I feel like you and I have like similar fitness journeys, you know? Like I was doing just weight training on my own for such a long time before I found CrossFit, for example. And that the main thing that drew me to Academy of Lions, for example, was just like the community aspect to it. And it was just that, like sharing stories with people, helping them better themselves, and going through this journey of like, hey, we're just trying to get healthy. It doesn't matter how you look or, that's not the goal. The goal is, hey, let's get better at something. Let's suck at something first, and then let's get better at it and go through that journey together. And it keeps me more motivated than I've ever been in my life, to be honest. So it's really cool to see you doing your thing. I was really curious, like, why, like, was there a reason why you chose the location that you did in Queen West?
So yes, I mean, I didn't know anything about Toronto, so I learned a lot of hard lessons along the way, moving here and starting a business. Because I was very Calgary, and Calgary's a very different city in all
Yeah.
aspects than Toronto. So I was like looking at it through that lens. However, when we got out of the car, we were looking at the space. It was very neighborhoody,
Hmm.
and that was what I was going for. Is like I got it at a couple others. I was like, it feels a bit corporate. Like I don't know. And we got out on West Queen West. There's people sitting on the chairs outside at Bolts, and like the patio at the Drake Cafe. And I was like, okay, this is something that I can get behind. Like this feels like a neighborhood that would accept a community. Because we did. It was funny. Like our real estate agent took us to a spot in Yorkville, and I still laugh about it because he was just like looking at like demographics and like numbers and stuff, and he's like, "Oh, check this space out."
Yeah.
We got out of the car, and like this guy and his driver drove by in a Bentley, and we're like, maybe this isn't the right neighborhood for our business. I don't know. I don't know how that's gonna fly.
Yeah.
And so it was just kind of funny that like I had no idea anything about Yorkville or what that meant or what the location meant. And then when we saw that, we're like, don't know about this one.
Yeah.
And yeah, so and then just the more we looked at Queen West and then like kind of looked, of course, like they give you the demographic information and we're like, oh, it's like young professionals and a lot of like there's like a lot of freelance stuff and a lot of those types of businesses that we're like, that's going to be our crowd. Like those are the people that tend to
Nice.
have that community mindset. So
That's awesome. Yeah, you made a really good choice. Like, that's such a awesome community, like you said. People just out and about. You know, I really love Queen West, so I'm happy you guys are there. You also did some bodybuilding, you mentioned, right? Or some weightlifting in the past, right? Was that what you're referring to when you said weightlifting?
yeah, so I started running. I was working in Angola,
Mm-hmm.
and I was at the time I was like in a camp, so I was staying like you were locked in like a compound basically, and
Mm-hmm.
we could buy beer. So at that point in my life, I was like drinking 6 beers a day. Like I was like full fledged party girl, like whenever we could. And I used to be mad when I'd have to go offshore because that meant like I couldn't have my beers for the day. And this group of guys that I worked with they were gonna go running at lunch, and I was like, I'm gonna come, and they like laughed at me, and I was like, what do you mean, like I'm fit? And they're like, no, you're not. And I was so insulted that I went, and I was like, I'm going, I don't care. And so I went, and we're running. We were gonna start. There's a hill, and we're gonna start like walk down and then run up. I went back to my room after and like vomited. I was like horrible mess. Like I died on that hill. And then I was like, oh shit, you are not fit. And then the mentality of like when someone says no, you do. So then I became a runner, and it went from like that day, that horrible hellish day, to I would run 10K every day at lunch. And in the Angolan lunchtime, it's like 38 degrees and like
Oh
99%
God.
humidity. And I was just like, no, we're doing it, doing it, doing it. And from there, that led to a half marathon. And then that led to a full marathon, which was the worst thing I've ever done, I think, maybe ever. And that I was broken. Like it's all these injuries and like couldn't move and like it was just a mess. And that led me to the weight room. And that's where I think I found my actual
Oh, I see. I
journey
see.
to fitness. It was like a
Which
long, weavy road to how we got there.
yeah, which marathon did you run, or where did you run this marathon?
The Royal Victoria Marathon in the fall. It was Thanksgiving weekend in 2010.
Crazy. Yeah, like you're the second person I've talked to that's run a marathon, and like it's always been in the back of my mind, like I should run a marathon just to like accomplish something. But
No,
yeah,
don't
the
do
other
it.
side, the other part of me is just like, man, I don't know. Like, well, people just end up so banged up, and as a physio, I see so many people banged up during training, after the races, and yeah. But I don't know. It's still in the back of my mind, so maybe we'll chat more about it some other time. So you started, so you left the running, you started in the weight room, and then like where did your journey go from there?
I actually started in the weight room in CrossFit. So that was kind of
Oh,
like when CrossFit
oh,
was first like really
yeah.
sort of
Starting up,
starting to
yeah.
become. So I had been going, there was a CrossFit gym. I was living in Red Deer at the time. I was working in Angola and commuting like from Red Deer. So I used to work 5 weeks on and 5 weeks off.
Hmm.
And there was this gym that it was an MMA gym that was started by a guy who used to fight in UFC. So he had an MMA gym. And then his wife on like the other side of this gym, it started with boot camps and then she
Hmm.
opened, it became CrossFit. And so I started doing CrossFit and that's how I found a barbell and just really, as that was sort of starting, kind of got really into it. And that's how I found my way to a weight room. I actually, how I found my way into like bodybuilding and that world is I'd found this like fitness camp in one of those magazines. So
Yeah.
bad. Like I didn't know how to lift weights. So I would take the magazine and go to the gym and like follow through the like Jamie Eason says you should do this workout to build your biceps. And it'd be like the 5 exercises. And I would go through and like follow my magazine, be like, done. And in that magazine, there was like this fitness camp in LA. And I was like, that sounds like really cool. I want to go and do
Hmm.
that. Like I've never, anyway, and it was, the camp was actually geared around competitors and like how to get people to the stage. And so that was like my first taste. I was like, what do you mean bring high heels? We're going to a fitness camp. I don't
Yeah,
get
yeah.
it. And it was like to practice posing. And I was like, oh. And the
Interesting.
trainer at this camp was actually from Calgary.
Wow.
And he was like a bodybuilding trainer. And I was like, oh, so if I want to bodybuild, I just got to like train with you and then I can do it. And then so that's how it happened. And he was probably like,
Cool.
you're an idiot. And the journey ahead is going to be big for you, but okay.
Wow. And how long did you compete in bodybuilding for?
So I did that camp in the end of 2010. And then I competed in my first show in like June of 2011, June or July of 2011.
Okay.
And I was terrible. Like I was so awkward on stage and like I didn't know how to walk in heels and was like, but I, again, like when you suck at something, you're like, I need redemption. Like that was really bad. I need redemption.
Mm-hmm.
And then I did it again the next year and like worked on the things that I needed to work on. Cause I thought I could just go to the gym and like show up with abs and be fine. And I was like, no.
What did you have to work on that first year? Like what were some of like the, I guess the gaps that you had that you were trying to improve?
So I just like I'd come from being a distance runner. So I was I was very, very lean. And they're like, it's not really like a feminine look. We were kind of going for, so I was like really, really lean and I was just like super shredded. And I was like, yeah, I'm so shredded. I'm totally going to win. And it was not. They were like, So bodybuilding, I love some aspects of the sport because I love how much the training pushes you in ways that you would never really push yourself. But the
Hmm.
other piece of it that I think is complete crap and I don't advocate for it is that you are judged based on someone else's opinion of what you should look like.
Hmm.
So they come across and they're like, "Oh, your movement was good, but your butt was too big." And you're like, "What?" Like how does that, so it became all about how you looked, but how you looked relative to other people. They're like, yeah, everyone on stage looked a certain way, but you were just a little too lean or you weren't lean enough. And then that became whether or not you were good enough. And I was like, this is stupid. Like I trained my ass off and now you're telling me that my muscles are too big or they're not big enough. And I just was like,
Yeah, it's almost like subjective, right?
It's super subjective and it depends on who
Yeah.
shows up that day and like who the judges are. And there was a point where I just like, I don't care what you think I should look like. This is what my body wants to look like. And so maybe we'll just move on from this. And I
Yeah.
also love food. So it's like dieting is terrible. I would sit there and I'd be miserable eating my chicken and whatever. And Sheldon's eating
Chicken
a
and broccoli.
steak. And I'm like, hate you. And I mean, Sheldon was great. So throughout the whole thing, like he helped me prep food and like did stuff, but there'd be times where like he would be eating a burger and I would be eating my like gross fish. And I'm like, no, like, because no.
Yeah, yeah, I can't imagine that. I think that's one of the reasons why I decided to never compete. Like, I remember one time I was at the gym and some guy was like coming up to me. He's like, "Hey, man, you look pretty good. Like, you should. Have you ever competed?" And I was like, "No, like, I'm not really into that." And it was because of the food. I'm like, I can't. Like, I'm so in love with food. I can't just have that kind of relationship where I just break up with pizza for like 6 weeks or something.
16 weeks.
16 weeks.
16 weeks. And then it's just, yeah.
Yeah, and I can imagine how that messes with your mind. I mean, I feel like I feel like I've suffered with like body dysmorphia where I look in the mirror and I'm kind of like, you know what? I think I'm too skinny or I'm too small or like this muscle's not big enough or whatever. And that was just me judging myself. Like not people really like not being on stage and being kind of finger pointed at and being told that, my traps aren't big enough or something. So I can't even imagine how that would mess with a person. Like how did that affect you as a person, like being told, hey, like, your shoulders are not big enough or too small or whatever?
So I guess for me in that sense is that you were always trying, like I took it as feedback to improve, and I would take these moments of like someone's telling you this, so that's like feedback for you to improve on next year. And then there was just a
Hmm.
moment where it clicked and I was like, this isn't, you're not actually improving, you're changing how you look based on someone else's opinion. So it's not an actual
Hmm.
improvement,
Hmm.
it's someone else's opinion of what you should look like that you changed to meet. And the there was a point, like I was miserable at the end of it, and I was away at a friend's wedding
Hmm.
in like the Dominican, and I was supposed to be dieting for the show, and I was at this wedding in the Dominican, and then I was like at the buffet one day and I was like, I'm done. Like I'm sitting here, I'm like watching all this food. I just spent like 2 hours in the gym while everyone else was out on the beach. Like, fuck it. And I texted my coach and was like, I quit. I'm done. See you later. I'll talk to you when I get back, but I'm enjoying the rest of this.
Nice. And how great did that feel?
It was good, but it
Yeah.
messes with your head a little bit because now you no longer have this like this thing that you're chasing. You're just kind of like, I hated the gym for about 3 months after that. Like I was like,
Hmm.
oh, I don't want to go to the gym. I don't want to train, because you didn't really have a purpose to train. And then you kind of found you're like, no, I actually like lifting weights and moving my body. So we'll just do it on my own terms. But I do find that the industry is riddled with a lot of insecurities and a lot
Yeah.
of like eating disorders disguised as fitness,
Yeah.
because everything you put in your mouth is controlled.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
calculated and it's controlled, and that is in its own essence disordered eating. And a lot of people that have struggled with those things turn it into fitness and like, look at my muscles, like I'm so fit, it's so healthy, and they like put this narrative out there that this is healthy, and I'm like, but it's not. Like, it's the
Yeah.
conversations are toxic and the energy is toxic. So it's not something I advocate for anymore. I'm like, when people are like, I'm thinking about doing a show, I'm like, good luck, have fun, talk to me in 16 weeks and we'll go have pizza. But yeah.
Awesome. Cool. Cool.
All right, so we talked about your bodybuilding. We talked a little bit about where you're from. We didn't get too much into Six Cycle just yet. So, talk to us about like sort of what gave you that idea. So you mentioned you came to Toronto. You said, "Hey, I'm looking for a good spin studio," and there's really not a lot of spin studios around the city. And what steps did you take then to like get this thing going?
So it's funny. I went out for some drinks when I was here on my business trip, and called
Yeah.
Sheldon at like 1 o'clock in the morning, and I was like, we need to move to Toronto and open up a spin studio. And he's like, okay. And I'm like, and we're gonna call it Six Cycle, and it's gonna be like this. And he was like, yeah, okay, we'll talk like tomorrow morning or whatever. And I'm like, no, I've got a plan. And so that was actually what started it.
That's so funny. How did you come up
And
with that name?
I so I'd been at a fitness expo the weekend prior, and they were selling these hoodies that said six on them. And I was like, oh, that's so cool. Toronto, the six, I get it. Ah. And I don't know, I just decided that that was what I was
Nice.
going to do. And then people were like, that's actually not a bad name. And
Yeah, it
then I,
sticks. It sticks.
yeah, it sticks. And then I realized like afterwards that Calgary and other places are the only places that refer to Toronto as the six. And Drake, everyone in Toronto was like, that's so lame. But we did it. It stuck. We decided to keep it. And then yeah, so we came home. We had been looking at ways to take the entrepreneurial jump,
Mhm.
but we had never really found anything that really resonated. There was a couple opportunities in Calgary that were like, I don't know. And then a friend of ours had a franchise opportunity based out of the US. So we went down and like did some classes and kind of tested out that model in Washington. And we're like, if we're gonna take the leap, do we want to take it on someone else's business and idea, or do we want to
Mhm.
do it ourselves? And then it just kind of all fell into place when there was no studios here that really hit the mark for me. Then I was like, you know what, this is what I need to do. And it's funny because as soon as I was like, yeah, we signed the lease, everyone else was like, hey, we're coming to Toronto. And I was like, what? I was like, here, I was like, I'm so smart. I have the best idea ever. I'm opening a spin studio and no one else is. And then everyone else was like, hey, so are we. And I was like, oh, it's either the worst idea I've ever had or the best one. Well, I guess we'll find out. We were kind of, sorry, can you still hear me?
Yeah,
There we go.
I can still
Sorry.
hear you.
There we go. It was weird. It was like one ear was not working. Anyway, so we rode the wave of everyone else opening, and
Mhm.
spin became kind of a thing. But yeah, as far as like why we did it, the crash of the oil and gas industry in 2015 was kind of one of the third ish, like when I started in oil and gas, we were kind of the base of
Mhm.
the crash coming up, and then we went through one in 2008, and then we went through this in 2014, or so 2015, 2016. Then
Mhm.
I was just like, we got to separate ourselves from this industry because it's going to happen again. And we need to diversify skills, and like we've always talked about wanting to work for ourselves. And so it just kind of was serendipitous. It happened, and spin was the way to go. And Sheldon's like, I got these pieces of the business. You can teach people how to teach spin, and we'll make it happen.
Nice. Yeah, I feel like that's one of the nice things in the past. Like, I mean, maybe it's just me, but in the past decade, I feel like humans have just decided, hey, you know what? I'm tired of sitting at a desk all day and just not moving. And people have begun to see the beauty in moving. Like you said, it's therapeutic. You know, we're moving because we want to, we're moving because we can. So it's really cool to see that kind of trend. And I feel like now it's here to stay. Like, there's so many benefits to movement, and spin is such a great way. And I feel as a physio too that it's a really good way to like not get really banged up. You know, I mean, with any sport, there's a risk of injury, but it's like low impact. It's not like running. It's not like, you know, playing soccer where someone might tackle you and you might mess up your ankle or something. So yeah, it's really cool to see the community grow, especially with something like spin. Where do you guys see yourselves like in the next 5 years? Like, do you still see yourselves in like the Queen West, or do you see like other studios opening up, or like what are you kind of like? Where's your mind at in the next 5 years?
So we are actually opening another studio now.
Oh, cool,
Um,
cool, cool.
Ideally, mid-August is kind of what we're aiming for. So we wanted to expand within the fitness realm, but not in spin. So we are opening up Six Flow, which is
Yes.
a music-driven movement studio. So I'm not going to say it's yoga because it's not just yoga, but we have hot yoga classes. We're going to have like movement Pilates classes, like hit-ish style classes, but everything is rooted in music.
Beautiful.
So I found that a lot of those types of workouts in Toronto specifically are accessible to people who either like love yoga or love Pilates, but for someone like me, they're not really appealing, or this is not really anything like that. So I'm like, how can I take the experience that we get in spin and give it to people in a way that in like it kind of gives them a more well-rounded training. So you're still going to spin, and then you can do this, and it's not going to like add injury or like and not telling you to be like, hey, like come to my running boot camp, so spin 3 times a week and then run 3 times a week and then break your body. It's like, hey, you know what you could do, you can spin this many times a week, you can do yoga here, or you can like do Pilates here, and you can enhance the overall experience and the overall wellness component. So that is coming ideally in the middle of August if COVID cooperates.
Yeah.
We're in the middle of like finishing that build out right now.
Nice. Yeah, it's really cool. Yeah, I saw Six Flow. I wanted to ask you about that, so I'm glad that we got a chance to talk about it. It's really cool. Like, I mean, I like that approach because that's sort of like if a patient asks me, hey, like they've never done any sort of fitness or anything, I'm just like, look, pick something you like, whatever it is, running, spinning, CrossFit, whatever. But mix it up once in a while, you know, throw in some yoga in there, throw in some Pilates in there, just move. And I feel like the more ways you move, the healthier your body is generally. It's just if you stick to one thing that things can kind of build up over time. So I feel like that's a really good approach to kind of say, hey, like you've got the spin, you've got the movement studio. I like that place to move. And I feel like you're a fan of music, is what it sounds like. What's your favorite kind of music?
I'm a big fan of hip hop. I fell in love with hip hop music the first time I ever heard Salt and Pepper. And I remember I was young and didn't realize how horribly inappropriate the lyrics were
Yeah.
until like I remember my mom being like, "No, you're not listening to that." And I was like, "What? What do you mean?" And then I listened to it like now and I'm like, "Ah,
So
yeah, okay."
clever.
Like it's
Yeah.
none of your business. Like, whoa, okay, mom, I understand now. And I remember being like so offended that she took it away. And then, like, as I grew up, I was like, this is like, it just really liked that music and like kind of dove into learning about it and learning about the roots of it and like learning about like East Coast versus West Coast and how like hip hop was like rooted in the like New York and in the East Coast and then how it kind of came about on the West Coast
Hmm.
and like what made that popular. And it was like such a cool thing that I love to learn, and that was one of the coolest things about hip hop music is there's so much history to it.
Yeah.
So it's like an added
Yeah.
component of um, and not just listening to the music and getting enjoyment from it there, but like actual learning from the history of where it came from.
Yeah. Have you seen the thing on Netflix? I forget what it was called, but there's like a show on Netflix that goes through the history of it.
No, I'm the worst. I don't actually watch TV very often.
Oh, okay, okay. It's called Hip Hop Evolution. If you ever decide to watch TV, Hip Hop Evolution, I feel like you'd really like that.
Noted. I
Yeah.
grew up without TV, so it's like a weird. I'm missing like the TV gene, if you will, where people are like, you know, you come home and you relax, you sit on the couch and turn on the TV. Our TV gets turned on like 5 times a year.
So what do you do when you want to relax then?
Like I feel like I come home and I like work and I do other stuff and I like find like download music and like it's just a weird thing that I don't ever think until it's like 11 o'clock at night. I'm like, oh, we could watch. Oh, maybe not. And so I watched in quarantine. I watched 2 episodes of Tiger King. Realized it was not for me, and then was like, okay, because I didn't get it. I didn't understand the memes, so I was like, I need to watch this because I don't understand what they're saying, and I
Yeah.
still kind of don't. But I was like, it's not for me. So, but yeah,
Yeah.
hip hop evolution. I will make a note.
Yeah, it's really cool. It goes through the whole history of, well, maybe not the whole history, but it goes through a lot of the history of hip hop in the States and goes, like you said, East Coast, West Coast, Southern hip hop, and where they get their influences and stuff like that. I think there's one on Canada too, so they talk about Canadian hip hop, which is really, really cool. Who are some of your favorite artists?
I really like Notorious B.I.G. I try to keep him alive in almost every spin class I teach. People are probably like tired of listening to the same 3 albums. I'm like, I got you. Listen here. I like the hip hop artists that like tell a story
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
so. So like Nipsey Hussle is another one that I'm a big fan. Jay-Z, like a lot of the older Jay-Z stuff I really like.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah, I really love the storytelling too, because it's kind of gone really far away from the storytelling. Now it's just like phrase, phrase, phrase.
Right. And before it was like there was like almost like mantras in it. Like there was almost like a life lesson in
Yeah.
the lyrics in the song and like I feel like you're right like with new age stuff it's kind of going away and I'm hoping that things will take a turn and bring that back because there is a lot of like when someone tells you it puts themselves out there and tells a life story in that vulnerable way but like makes it artistic it's there's
Hmm.
nothing more powerful than that.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree. I feel like some artists are still kind of keeping it alive. Like J. Cole's really good. I really love him. He's really good at storytelling. I remember I'm a big Tupac fan. I love Biggie too. Obviously, I know there's that beef with them. I feel like you can love both, right? You can love both. Um, and I remember I was in university and I was listening to Tupac, and my roommate at the time he was like, "Hey, you like Tupac, man?" Like, cause I listen to him every fucking day, right? And he's like, "You should listen to J. Cole." And this was back in like 2010, right? So I was just stuck in like this like Tupac kind of like bubble. And I listened to J. Cole and I was like, man, this guy sounds just like Tupac in some of the songs. It was really, really cool. So yeah, I really love the storytelling stuff. It's really, like you said, quite powerful. All right, so we've got less than a minute here. So why don't we?
Tell
It's because I
people.
talk too much.
Not at all. I'm 100% sure everyone wants to hear you talk. I know I want to hear you talk. Why don't we tell everybody if they want to either rent a bike or if they want to take a class, like where do they go if they want to do some spinning?
Sixcycle.com, or you can find us on Instagram at 6_cycle, and it links all the ways through there. That's kind of the hub. So that's where you find us.
Beautiful. All right. Thank you for your time, Julie. I know you're a very busy person, so I appreciate you making the time to chat with us.
Thank you for having me.
You're very, very welcome. We'll see you soon, okay?
Yeah, sounds good. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.